Hello all, welcome back to the session. So in this session, let's try to learn about more things in the JavaScript. So for that, let's have a small recap of what are the things that we have learned. What were the things that we have learned in the previous session, and what are the things that we are going to learn in this respective session altogether. So in the previous session, we have learned about the JavaScript fundamentals. We have learned about the variables. We have learned about the difference between what is meant by a declaration, what is meant by an initialization. We have seen how many ways that we can initialize our respective variable. And also, we have seen about three ways of declaring or initializing any kind of a variable in JavaScript using let, var, and const. We have a little knowledge at this given point of time about var, using var keyword to declare or initialize a variable. As we go forward, we try to understand the primary difference between the let and var. In the most common, um, you know, updated JavaScript uses let for declaring variables and const for declaring variables, but not var. You will get to know about this in furthermore sessions as we go forward. We try to understand the deeper internals of JavaScript. So that is the first thing that we have learned in the previous session. And in this session, we'll be learning about three important things. First one is what are variable naming rules. Second one is the data types that are present in the JavaScript. And the third one is interaction. How can we have this basic JavaScript tools where those tools will help us to interact or helps us users to interact with the given particular website. So these are the today's session's topic. So without any given particular day, let's go ahead and let's try to work upon that thing. So for that, I'll be opening my VS Code. I have already opened this respective VS Code. So currently I'm in this given particular VS Code, and I'll be have this given particular thing where we have seen what is the variable, the definition, the initialization part, what is meant by the declaration part. We have seen all of these respective things. So let me remove all of these things. So we have declared the respective variables using let. We have declared the respective variables using var. We have declared the respective variables using const. So in this today's session, let's try to understand what are the naming variables rules, or let me keep it in this respect to format altogether. Sorry, naming rules or variable naming rules to be more precise. Um, variable naming rules. So let's try to understand what are the different kind of a naming variable rules that we have. Let me write it like this. Let me write a. Let me first mention this respective variable naming rules altogether. Let me write it. First thing would be specifically there are, I can say, two limitations. Right, there are two limitations on variable names in JavaScript. The first one would be the variable name must consist I can say, or I can say must contain only letters, digits, or symbols like dollar symbol and underscore symbol. Second rule would be the first character must not be a desert. These are the two basic rules that we are going to follow when we are naming any kind of a variable. And also, I'll explain you how a name should be given and what is the type of case that we are going to use. Sorry. So let's say I can say valid usernames. Let me write it. Valid user names. It would be, I'll say let user name. I can say let test 123. These are valid usernames because, as you can clearly see, the name must contain only letters, digits, or symbols. Only two symbols are allowed in the respective naming a given particular variable: dollar symbol or underscore symbol. The other rule is the first character must not be a digit. So now I'll try to give invalid examples specifically, or let me give few more examples of this given particular valid usernames. I can keep simply say let dollar is equal to something like Nathan. I can say let underscore is equal to 1 2 3 4. This is completely valid. This is completely right because a variable name can start and can consist dollar symbol at the same time the underscore symbol altogether, right? So this is how the naming, the valid names would actually be looking like. Now, one very important thing I want to mention is if you can clearly observe, whenever I am writing this given particular variables, specifically if you observe username, this is not a normal way of writing. In general, if I want to write username, I simply write username. But here I have written it as username. So what is the difference between the left side part and this way I'm writing this variable name as this given particular thing? There is this one thing known as camel case. So in JavaScript, while naming a variable name, while naming a variable, we use camel case. This is must and should. This is a standard practice across all the JavaScript things. All the JavaScript things, we follow this simple primary rules altogether. Now, what is meant by this given particular camel case? Let me explain this thing. So, to explain this camel case, if you can say, if we have a name, any name, with combining two or more words, or with combining more than one word, combine one or more words, then the second letter or the second word should start with um, a capital letter. Should start with a capital case or uppercase, which is nothing but if you can clearly observe here in the example of username, we have a word known as user, which is a separate entity word altogether, and we have something like a name. If you want to divide these things, this one single word, you can divide it into two different names. I mean, two different words altogether. First thing is user. It is a different entity. It has a different meaning altogether. And second one is name. It is also a different word. It has a different meaning altogether. When you are trying to combine these two different words into one single word, then you follow this respective thing known as a camel case, where the first word will be as in a small letters. But coming back to this second word, when we want to join this second word to the first word, we're going to keep this thing in a camel case where the second word will be starting with a capital letter. That's why I have written it as first name. Even to give more examples, I can simply write let first name, let last name, last name. You might be asking this, or you might be getting this given particular doubt. What if we don't follow this camel case while naming a variable? You don't have any kind of an issues. When you follow or when you don't follow any kind of a camel case altogether. But one very important thing across this JavaScript domain is, I think, but this convention, whatever this camel case has been implemented across JavaScript, it is by default had some kind of a convention. Like it is kind of a standard rule that we follow when we are naming variables inside this respective JavaScript altogether. That's the standard point. So whenever you're writing code, as we go on and write the respective code in the JavaScript, we try to keep our naming variables in the camel case altogether. So there is no problem if you don't follow camel case, but it is a rule, it is a best practice to follow this camel case while naming a given particular variable. That is also the reason why I'm also following this camel case. So furthermore, as we go on into different sessions altogether, we'll see this camel case repeatedly. And I urge you specifically to actually follow this camel case. Follow these basic rules. That would be sufficient. Now, yeah, we have seen this valid examples or valid usernames altogether. Now let's see invalid usernames. I can say something like let 1a, sorry, 1a. Because if you can clearly observe, the first character must not be a digit. This is a second rule. While naming a respective variable in a JavaScript, the second rule is the first character must not be a digit. But in this given particular example, the first character is a digit. That's why it is showing me an error. And second thing is, apart from these respective dollar and the underscore, if you can clearly observe the dollar and the respective underscore altogether. Give me a minute. Yeah. Give me a minute. Let me do this one thing, just a notification part. Now let's get back to this respective session. Um, yes, we can go ahead and yeah, we can implement the things. That's fine. So yeah. So apart from this respective symbols, dollar and this respective underscore, if we try to use any kind of other symbols, for example, if I say my dash name, if I ever try to do or give a name of a given particular variable like this, even if I follow my camel casing thing, it still be shown as an error. It will be still shown as an error. So this is the one thing that we can say. Similarly, um, and also one very important thing that I've missed to explain you. Let me explain it off. Let me remove this invalid names. Okay, let me remove this invalid name, or let me keep this thing invalid names. I can say in JavaScript, case matters. This is another statement that I want to mention. What is meant by this case matters altogether? In JavaScript, let's say if you have two variables, I'll say simple let apple, and I'll say another thing known as apple. So when a user read that these two variables, the first variable is apple, the second variable is also apple. But for a human, it appears that these two are same. But for JavaScript, these two are not at all same. These two all not at all same. Even if I say something like let apple, at least these three are not at all same. Because if you can clearly observe, this first one or the first variable is in lowercase. You can clearly see everything is in small letters. Specifically here, the entire apple is present in uppercase. But coming back to this thing, here it is in general format, or it's a combination of lowercase plus uppercase altogether. This is the combination that we actually have in this given particular thing. Even if you say the spelling is very common between all of these things, due to this case difference, lowercase, uppercase, and the combination of lowercase and uppercase, these three different respective variables are completely different in the perspective of JavaScript. So in JavaScript, case actually matters. This is the one very important thing we need to understand. And finally, you might be having these things. There are something known as reserved keywords. Reserved keywords or reserved names. There is some kind of a list of reserved keywords that are present. You can just search in this respective internet. But apart from that, there are few reserved key names that are present in JavaScript where those reserved names cannot be mentioned as variable names altogether. For example, there are reserved names like, let me mention it, let class return function. So there are this respective things. If I, let's say for example, if I want to name my variable as let, so I'll have let, and let is equal to some 5. Now in this given case, let is a keyword. As we have seen, let is a keyword which helps us to declare the variables. Similarly, if I use something like let function is equal to hi, this is not allowed. This is not allowed. We cannot name the variable function because function is a reserved keyword. We cannot name the variable let because let is a reserved keyword altogether. Reserved keyword altogether. So these are the basic things that we need to understand when we are actually going ahead with this respective naming of this JavaScript thing altogether. Now, another important thing, like how do we name things right? Name things right. How do we name the respective things right? So to understand this given particular thing, to have this bit context of what exactly meant by this given particular thing, how do we name a given particular variable in a JavaScript altogether? To come to that point, we have few rules altogether. So the rules would be, let me write it in a multi-line comment. So the first rule is use human readable names like username or first name. This is the first rule. When you are naming a respective variable, try to follow these rules. Anyways, what are limitations that I have told? We have some kind of a naming rules, but in general, by abiding to this respective rules, if you ever want to name any kind of a variable, follow these rules. These are golden rules that need to be followed when you are naming any kind of a variable. I can say stay away from abbreviations, abbreviations, or I can say short names like simply let A, or simply some say let B. Don't do these kind of a short names altogether, because if it is a very normal program, then you can do this thing. But when you're writing the business logic, never entertain this given particular shorter names or abbreviations altogether. Third rule is make names maximally descriptive and concise. To be more precise, I can say the examples for bad names. I can say bad names. Example would be something like data, something like value. So these specific names, variable names, doesn't suggest you anything. Even other persons reading your code will not try to understand what exactly meant by data, what exactly we are trying to store inside this respective data. Try to be as clear as possible. For example, if I'm sharing any kind of a market data, I'll say market data. Market data. Sorry, market data. If I'm actually recording any kind of a weather values, weather values, weather value. So try to mention it as descriptive. So the variable name should be descriptive. If I am ever trying to store any kind of a market data, I name my variable like this. Instead of lazily labeling it as data, I label it as market data. So by reading the the variable itself, I can clearly understand, okay, this variable is storing market data. Similarly with the second word. So try to be as descriptive as possible. And finally we have this thing. Uh, Agree on terms within your current team, within your team and in your mind. This is super important. Let's say if someone says in your team they want to name a variable name as user, it's a user is a bad name, because for a given particular website, a user can, I mean, there can be different users. A current user who is using the current website at this given point of time, a depreciated user who is the customer of this respective website, but currently is not anymore the customer of this website. So the one very important thing is when you're working within the team, make sure you sort out this given particular thing. Instead of naming like user, you can simply say current user, or if you can simply write it as new user if he's the one who logged in or sign up into your respective website newly. So try to be as descriptive as possible. And while you are naming these things, when you are working in the respective team, come to a common grounds with your respective team, and that clears a lot of issues altogether. That would be the respective things that I suggest for each and every respective programmer who is going to program in the JavaScript altogether. And yeah, these are about this respective thing known as naming different variables. Now let me remove all of this, or um, yeah, let me remove all of these things. I think we can keep them. We can keep them. We can keep them. Right. Let me remove all of these things. I think we can keep it here. Let me create a new file. Let's say um, data types dot index. Do not worry. I'll try to data types dot js. So I'll try to push this respect to different codes, different things into GitHub repository, and I'll share the GitHub repository with you. Right now, yeah, let's go ahead and let's try to implement these kind of things. We close this index dot thing. Let me close this thing. Right. Now, one very important thing we need to understand is what is meant by this respect to data type. Let me have a small definition. What is meant by data type? So coming back to this respect to data type, value in JavaScript is always of a certain type. For example, it could be a string or a number. So people who don't know what is meant by string, we're going to coming to the point within a few minutes. So for example, there are around, I can say there are um, 8 basic data types. Basic data types in JavaScript. We're going to see what are those 8 basic data types on a high overview point of view in this respective session. As we go forward to 2 more sessions, we're going to clearly understand how each respective data type will actually be working. So at this point of time, let's focus on the overview part. Let's try to understand what are these different 8 basic data types in the JavaScript that are present. So let's go ahead and let's try to understand. For example, if I say let message is equal to something known as hi, and I can also say this is known as is equal to 1 to 3. I can do this respective thing. So one very important thing we need to understand is, we can put any type in a variable. At 7th line number, I have a variable named as MSG where it is storing some string data. String data is nothing but some kind of a text. String means text. String means text. You can clearly see whenever we have this given particular thing in quotations, double quotations or single quotations, we have this thing known as a string type. Similarly, we have in the 8th line where the same variable where we have initialized in the 7th line, the same variable is now storing something known as numbers. This is what I meant by dynamic programming. This nature is actually known as dynamic programming. So what is meant by dynamic programming? As we can clearly see, JS is a dynamic programming language. Dynamic programming language. What is meant by this given particular dynamic programming language altogether? So at the 7th line, we can clearly see that this respective variable has been initialized and is actually storing a data type known as string, a text. But in the next 8th line, the data that this variable is storing a number. So this is what meant by dynamic programming. So JavaScript allows this kind of a dynamic programming altogether. Where the other ways we can call this dynamic programming as, instead of dynamic programming, I can call it as dynamic typing. Instead of dynamic programming, because dynamic programming includes few other respective details altogether. This is actually known as dynamic typing. Instead of calling it as dynamic programming, I can clearly say JavaScript is a dynamic typing language. So what is meant by dynamic typing language? Because dynamic programming language altogether includes different other things apart from dynamic typing also altogether. So if you can clearly observe, in the 7th line, we have our variable storing a string, but in the 8th line, we have our variable, the same variable storing something known as a number. So this transition from one line to another line makes this JavaScript has these variables to store any kind of a data type at any given particular point of time. That is what meant by dynamic typing. That is what meant by dynamic typing. Now, sorry. Nice. So specifically in JavaScript, let's try to understand what is meant by this basic data types. So as we have this respective thing known as a data type, which is nothing but a value. It can be a text, it can be a number, it can be so and so. Let's try to understand what are these 8 different basic data types that we have. The first one would be, let me give it to this. The first one would be number. Number. A JavaScript variable can store a number. Second one would be string. A JavaScript variable can store a string. Similarly, we have this respective thing known as a boolean. A JavaScript variable can store a boolean. It can store a data type known as null, undefined, objects. Instead of objects, I can say symbols. Right. So around we have number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What are other 2? Because I have clearly mentioned I have 8 basic data types that we can store. In number, we have few segregations. At the same time, we have other unique data type that also present here. So let's try to understand what is this respect to number data type altogether. So let me name it as like this. Sorry. I can say that if I simply say let n is equal to something known as 1, 2, 3. So here we have a variable named as n, where it is storing a value of number, a data type of number. Here the data type that this given particular variable is storing is a number. Similarly, I can simply say n is equal to, it can also store like this 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, or okay, I can say yes. So here initially the variable is storing a number. Here also the initial the variable is storing a number. But the difference between 123 and 12.345 is different, because here we don't have any kind of a decimal. But here, when we are saying 12.345, we have some kind of a decimal altogether. So whenever we say this given particular thing, here in JavaScript, this given particular variable is actually storing the respective data type of numbers only. That's standard. Even if the variable is storing some decimal number or it is storing some kind of whole number, we consider that this respective variable is actually storing a data type of number only. This is the one fundamental thing that we need to understand. And also one very important thing in specifically that specifically allotted for this respective thing of JavaScript is nothing but there is something known as special numericals. I think, if I'm not, special numbers, numericals, sort of a thing. All these respective things. So I can say special numerical values. We can clearly say infinity, and minus infinity. So there are special numerical values specifically registered only in the JavaScript language, which are known as infinity and all of it. For example, if I somehow if I say console.log 1 divided by 0. If you try to do this 1 divided by 0, I'll come to this, the operators that are present inside this given particular thing. Because for number, when we are having, or I can say when we are having numbers in a variable, we can use the following operators to perform operations. Following operators to perform operations. Like we can add two numbers, we can subtract two numbers, we can multiply two numbers, we can divide two numbers, we can do all of these things. We can do all of this, and we can also find modulus, the remainder of this given particular number. We can do exponentiation. We can do exponentiation. We can do a lot more things with the respect to numbers. If you have two numbers or if you have single number, we can do all of these operations altogether. Right? Now coming back to the same thing here, when I am trying to divide 1 with 0, the standard answer that we know is infinity. But when it comes to programming language, when you do the same thing in Python, if I say print something like this 1 divided by 0, Python will generate me something known as error. Python will give me output as error. But one very interesting part is when I try to run this given particular code in JavaScript, I don't get error. It shows me special numerical value named as infinity. For example, let's try the same thing. I'll simply say node data types .js. Now, if you can clearly observe, I've tried to run whatever code that is present inside this respective file named as datatypes.js. Now, I can clearly see the output that I got is infinity because I'm trying to divide 1 with 0. I haven't got any kind of an error. That is an advantage of JavaScript. In JavaScript, it is a bit lenient compared to other programming languages, and it is a bit confusing compared to other programming languages altogether. But if you understand the fundamentals properly, everything is cakewalk. So this is how the JavaScript handles few special cases, where to handle these few special cases when dealing with numbers, JavaScript has special numerical values for us. Infinity and minus infinity, which is nothing but if I have this minus 1 divided by 0, obviously, you'll see the output as minus infinity altogether. Similarly, if I simply say, instead of this, I can simply say infinity. And if I simply clear and if I run the command, you'll see there's a special numerical value. You can simply say infinity plus 1. You can do this thing. You can run the code and you see still infinity, because infinity plus 1, infinity plus 0, infinity multiplied by 0. Infinity multiplied by 0. Let's run the code. Let's see what is the output. You'll see it is a nan. Now coming back to this thing, nan is also a unique data type. We're going to see this data type specifically. This is a very important thing when it comes under the interview part, but we'll see that point at later. Later means in just 1-2 sessions, we're going to see that thing. So this is how we have this special numerical values that is a given particular thing. Similarly, we have seen something known as a nan. Let's talk about this bit nan about this given particular thing. Um, let me try to do this one thing. 1 divided by 0. Let's keep this thing as infinity. Similarly, if I try to do this thing, let's say console.log, because you can clearly observe division can occur between two numbers. Division can occur between two numbers. We can clearly say 4 divided by 2. It is a valid operation altogether because division operator, this slash, we can clearly observe this slash operator. The slash operator is used for numbers. When we have two numbers, we can use this division operator because whenever we are dealing with numbers, we can do addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and all of these things. But what if we have something like this? Hello. So here we have our data, which is in the format of text, which is in the format of string, and we are trying to divide it with a number. Now comes to the interesting point. Let's see how does JavaScript handle this given particular case. If you try to do the same example in Python or any other kind of language, it shows you an error. But JavaScript is a bit lenient and it knows how to handle errors intelligently. Now, whenever we are trying to divide a text, which is completely string, with a number, which is not at all possible. In other programming language, we'll get an error, but let's see what is the output of this respective thing. Let me do this thing. Let me run the code. I can clearly see the output for this given particular thing is nan. What is meant by nan? Sorry. In the previous thing where we have seen this console.log infinity multiplied by 0. Even still, we got this respect to output as nan. What is meant by this respect to thing as known as nan? So coming back to this nan, JavaScript has this unique way of dealing, specifically when dealing with numbers, dealing with the issues with the numbers, which is known as not a number. The full form of nan is not a number, which is nothing but whenever I am performing any kind of a mathematical operation, mathematical operators between two different data types, Let me write it. When we perform math operation between two different data types. Two different data types altogether. Then that operation, let me write it. Then that operation should fail. So in a programming language, if an operation is getting failed, it should show an error. But JavaScript, JS, instead of showing error, it goes with a special unique thing, a special numerical value named as nan altogether. A special unique name known as nan, not a number. Because whenever we are dividing a text with a number, which is not possible, because when you want to divide, both the data types should be number. If it's not the case, instead of showing error, JavaScript shows this a special numerical value known as nan. So one very important thing I just want to mention is nan is sticky. Nan is sticky. What is meant by this thing known as sticky? For example, if I simply say console.log, I'll say nan plus 1. You'll get the output as nan. If someone says console.log 3 multiplied by nan, this is the one thing. You'll still get the output as nan. Sorry, I haven't mentioned it. Console.log, if I say hi divided by 2 minus 1, nan. That is what meant by nan is sticky. When you are dealing with respect to special numerical value, I can say this special data type in JavaScript, whatever you do with it, you'll get nan as an output. Whatever you do with, you'll get an output as a nan. Even if you say console.log nan into 0, you'll still get nan. 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 So one very important thing why we have this special operator, special numerical value named as nan is because in JavaScript, let me write it below. In JavaScript, doing math is safe. Doing math is safe. In JavaScript, doing math is safe. That's a standard thing. That's a standard rule. That's why we have these things. That's why we have this respective things. So to clearly understand about this respective, to clearly understand about this respective things, let's focus more about this numbers things. Let's try to understand these numbers things detailedly at some other session altogether. We going to clearly understand each and every we're going to clearly understand about each and respective data type clearly in the next further sessions altogether. That would be the respective thing. Yes, now let's focus upon other data type known as big int. What is respect to this thing known as a big int? It is also a part of number data type. But one very important thing we need to understand is, this is very important thing. In JavaScript, the number data type cannot safely represent integer value larger than or greater than 2 power 53. Okay. 2 power 53 minus 1. So this would be something, a number like 900 7199 254 74091. So this number is this. Let's say if you can store an integer in a variable greater than this number or less than minus 2 power 53 minus 1, where we have this respective thing. Let me copy paste it. Right. This is minus. So whenever you are storing any kind of a number in a given particular variable, greater than this number cannot be handled by this number data type. Less than this number cannot be handled by this number data type. So there is a specific domain. Let's say if I ever try to do console.log plus 1, if I ever try to do it, let me remove or keep all of them. I can okay, let's, instead of doing it, okay, let's run the code. Now if you can clearly observe the output that we got, ignore this respect to nans. If you can clearly remember, for this entire big thing, if I try to add 1, you can clearly see, check the last 3 digits, 991 plus 1, it would be 992. Now whenever I try to do the same thing, 991 plus of 2. Now observe these 2 console logs. Let me write it here, no data type. Now you can clearly see the output for this respective thing is this very large number and the output for this is also the same. Whenever you try to add for this given particular number, if you try to add 1, it is around 992. But for the same number, if I try to add plus 2, you can clearly see it is not going beyond that. That is what I meant by it. So whenever you want to store in a given particular variable, or whenever you want to compute any kind of a mathematical operation with this size of a large number, then JavaScript cannot handle. JavaScript limitation is your number should be present between these ranges. Between these ranges. It should not be greater than this, it should not be less than this. But another important thing is, whenever we are dealing with some other type of a different set of I can say important, not important, a different set of cryptography, if different set of complex algorithms, will have numbers greater than this range. We have numbers less than this range. Less than this range. Then JavaScript will be unable to handle such kind of things. So to make JavaScript enable to store much more complex things greater than this number, if you want to store any kind of a variable or data in a variable greater than this number, and I want to store a very, very small number, negligibly very small number, which is less than this respect to highlighted number, then how does JavaScript incorporate such kind of a technique such that it can be able to store a given particular thing? So in that context, we have this respect to thing data type known as an bigint. We have this respect to type known as bigint. So what is meant by this respect to thing known as a bigint? Big int. So this was recently added to this respect to JavaScript thing. So this is used to create a large values or used to store a large values or very small values. If you can clearly observe here, whenever we have this very big, I mean very more number of character numbers, I mean instead of, I can say this negative number is very small. It is very small. But in order to store such kind of a very small numbers, and you want to store very large numbers, we use this given particular bigint. So how do we store this respect to thing known as a bigint? Is nothing but big int value is created by appending n, small n, to the end of integer. So I'll simply say const bigint is equal to something like if I ever want to store this respect to very big number into a respect to variable, you can clearly see here we have 3 dots in VS Code. Whenever you have 3 dots in VS Code, it clearly mentions that there is some kind of an issue with the respect to code. So if I simply mention s, n, I can clearly see the 3 dots are missing. When I append a small n like this, this integer or this variable is not storing a data type of number. It is storing this integer, this variable is storing a data type of bigint. That's how this entire thing actually work, right? So this is what meant by respect to this thing known as bigint. But this is rarely used. But we don't, when I are building websites, you don't see this kind of a very big numbers. It's not that possible to say this respect to big numbers altogether. Now, now let's go ahead and understand the other data type, which is known as string. So string is nothing but text. String is nothing but text. So what is respect to text? If in a given particular variable, if you want to store any kind of a text, let's say if I say let value is equal to not a value, let value is equal to, or if I say let msg is equal to, okay, let me give it as this. We have a variable named as message. If I want to ever store this respect to variable, if I say hi, I can do this thing. If I say let greeting is equal to, I can store similar thing as hi. And if I say let greeting message phrase, if I ever want to say, I can use something known as, okay, Interesting. Give me a minute. Give me a minute, guys. Something issue with my keyboard. Just give me a minute. So yeah, my keyboard has been resolved now. Let's go ahead and let's try to implement this respective thing. Um, yeah. So the third way of creating strings in respect to JavaScript would be using this thing known as backticks. You have this backticks below your escape button in your keyboard. When you click on it, you'll have this respect to backticks. So I can clearly say hello. Oh, I can clearly say like this. The advantage of using this backticks is I can embed other things. I can say message. How are you? So we can create string data types using double quotes and single quotes, but we also have this third option known as backticks. We can create in Java, we can create strings in JavaScript using this respect to backticks. So the advantage of having this backticks is we can use this dollar and this curly braces so that we can embed the respective elements in it, the respective other variables inside our string format altogether. So you can't able to embed these things. For example, if I want to embed this message into this given particular string, if I say this, if I do the same thing, I'll say, if I say meeting, or sorry, not meeting, it's message. So you can clearly see here it is considered as a string, but when are you using backticks with this respect to symbol known as dollar with the flower braces altogether, and in between this thing we have this variable here. This variable will be accessed. Here the variable will not be accessed. This is as usual the thing. Let me run the code. Let me run the code. Okay, let me run this code. Let me remove this unnecessary things. Okay, let me console dot, sorry, not asset, but console dot log message. We have this thing greeting. We have this phrase. We can do this, all of the things together. Okay, instead of doing it together, let me write it in this format. Sorry. Let me write it in this pattern. Right. We have 3 console logs because we have created 3 string variables or variables which are storing strings. Let's see what will be the output. I can clearly see the first output is in the variable message we have stored high. That's why we have this output as high. In the second variable, we have stored this entire thing. Now you can clearly see in the second message, we tried to embed this thing. Embed means we try to include this respective variable inside this simple text string. You can clearly see it is not happened. It is not happened. It is as it is. But whenever we try to embed our respective variable using backticks, you can clearly observe here in this embed in the form of this embed thing, or in the place of this embed thing, we have something known as hi. You can clearly see in the third statement, hi, how are you altogether. So when are you trying to use a different variable into a string, where to be more specific, whenever you want to use the data that is present in another variable where you want that data to be present in a string format, we can use this respective thing. So this is how we can define strings in our respective thing, in our respective strings format altogether. You can simply do this one thing. You can simply say console.log, because this backticks gives you wings. So I'll say 1 plus 2. It would be something like result is. So whenever I'm trying to embed a different data type into string data type, different data type, different variables into string data type, I can use this backticks altogether. This backticks altogether are very pretty much useful. Let me rerun the code. I can clearly see the third is, result is 3. You can clearly observe the result is 3. This is what it is exactly showing for us. Exactly showing for us. This is how the string data will be working for out. Now coming back to this thing. Right. Let me do this thing. The other data type that we are going to see is Boolean. So what is meant by Boolean? So in this data type, we can actually store true or false, not PR, but false, or true or false. So what is respect to this given particular thing known as a true or false? For example, if I say, okay, let is married is equal to true. If I say let uh, um, um, is admin, and simply say false. Can simply say false. This is how this respective thing. So completely, this would be Boolean would be completely logical. Whenever you see a variable is storing true or false, then these variables are storing something known as a data type named as Boolean altogether. Boolean altogether. Because this is completely logical. If I say let greater is equal to something like 4 greater than 1, and if I console.log greater, and if I run the code, let me run the code, you can clearly see the console log is telling that true, because 4 is always greater than 1 according to the mathematical rule. So it is, the value is true. So this logical things will be stored inside the respective variable. Whenever such kind of a logical operations output is storing inside a respective variable, then that variable is storing a data type known as a Boolean. This is what meant by Boolean. Now let's now let's there is another data type known as null. So what is meant by this null? This is null is a special data type or special value that is present inside this respective JavaScript. So we cannot say that this belong to number type or string type or boolean. This is altogether special value altogether. So I can simply say let age is equal to something known as null. I can simply say. So what is meant by null? In JavaScript specifically, this is not a reference. I repeat, this is a very important thing, to a non-existing object or a null pointer. People who have studied this JavaScript or the C++ or C programming language, they'll understand this thing. They'll understand thing. So when in null in JavaScript doesn't mean null pointer or some other thing, but null actually means nothing. Nothing. So in 72, I'm clearly telling that age is a variable I have initialized, but it's storing nothing. It is storing nothing at all. That is what meant by this respect to null. So I can say it is nothing but this age is storing something empty. I mean, it's not storing empty, or this age is one such a variable that is representing empty or nothing or value unknown. Value unknown. Whenever someone says null in a given particular variable, we have these respective meanings altogether attached to it. So according to this code, I can say age is a variable that is unknown at this given point of time. That is what this statement actually meant. Now another data type we have is undefined. There's another data type, special data type that is present inside our JavaScript. So as the name suggests, let's say if I declared a variable, I repeat, if I declared a variable, if I say let name, and if I simply console.log name, instead of name, let me be precise, username. Let me be more precise. Instead of just handing names, let's try to have username. So I have declared a variable username. Now one very important thing is I just want to understand, when we just declare the variable in JavaScript, what exactly will be storing inside the variable? The question is, when we just declare but not store anything in a variable, what will be storing in it? What will be storing, or what will be storing in that variable? That's the question. So that's what I'm trying here. I've declared a variable and just want to see what exactly is stored inside this variable. Now if you can clearly see, when I run the code, we have this output as undefined. It is clearly mentioned that this variable is declared, but there is nothing inside it. It's just been declared. There's nothing value stored inside it. There's nothing is actually stored. So if nothing is stored inside a variable, then it stores or undefined. Then it stores a data type of undefined. This is what exactly it happens. This is what exactly what it happens. Similarly, if I simply let a is equal to some 100, in the next line I can say a is equal to undefined. And if I console log this a, let me comment this able line. And if I run this line, you can clearly see now, when I want to see what is the thing that is stored inside there, it is storing something known as undefined. Undefined is also a special type. Undefined is also a special type. So these are the respective different basic data types that we have. Specifically, we also have something like symbols. Symbols doesn't come under this format. We have objects and symbols, which are advanced part or non-primitive data types altogether. We can call in that way. We're going to understand this objects and symbols when we study about them, because they are completely complex in a bit more compared to this number, string, boolean, null, and undefined. We're going to understand them at that given particular point. Now, let's go it. Let's write it. If we have any, or if we want to know any data type, sorry, not a data type, data type that a variable is storing, then we can say, or then we can use special operator. You can say use a operator named as type of altogether, which is nothing but, let's say, if I ever want to understand what exactly MSG variable is storing, okay, instead of MSG variable, let's focus on this thing. Let's say here we have a variable named as n. If we want to understand what data type or what type of value is stored inside this variable known as n, I'll simply use this operator console known as type of n. That's it. Like again, you see the output is number. The output is number. The output is number. Similarly, if I want to understand what exactly is stored inside something known as message, a variable named as message, I'll run the code. You can clearly see the output is string. The output is string. Similarly, if I want to understand what type exactly stored inside a variable named as a, you can clearly see a is storing undefined. So undefined is the output. So if you want to clearly understand what exactly at a given point of time a variable is storing a value, what type of value it is storing, you can have this operator known as type of. So these are the respective different data types that are present that we want to know on a high overview point of view in this respective session. And we also have this thing, like this very important thing, like the interaction part, which we are going to see because the session is actually prolonged for a bit more. Now I'll end the session till this point, and let's try to have this third interaction part in the next session altogether. So that would be this respective session. I hope you understood this entire session, and thank you all.